Everybody, it is my honor, and I want to thank everybody for listening to this radio show and podcast, Fire, Breathe, and Rob. We know we always bring the fire on this program. Thank you so much for listening. This is the former 2020 Democratic presidential candidate. He is an activist, and he also started NextGen as the founder. And everybody knows this man. It's Tom Steyer, and I'm so honored to have you on, Mr. Steyer. Thanks so much for coming on Fire, Breathe, and Rob today.
Rob, it's great to be with you, and please call me Tom because everybody does.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tom. So let's kick this around. I said there's so many things we got to talk about in so little time. So as a person that's an environmentalist, how did you become an environmentalist? Because I asked that because we see a lot of people that are well off and did great in business, but they're not really activists for environmental policy.
Well, it's my whole family. About 15 years ago, I've got 4 kids who are now 32, 30, 28, and 26. So 15 years ago, sitting around the kitchen table, we were trying to figure out, in 100 years, if people look back at us, what are they going to go? These people just didn't get it. These people missed the point. They left us in a terrible hole. Because, when we look back, we see things that have happened and you think, how could people who are smart have gone this way? And we thought, wow, our society, America, is not dealing with climate. How is that possible? And so really, I started to research it and try and figure out ways. And climate really led me not just to environmentalism, but to environmental justice and economic and racial justice more broadly. And so really, coming out of just a discussion with my family and a sense, the other thing that's true is, I try and, I believe in God.
Right.
And so I want to have a life that squares with my belief in God. And so I felt like I can't stand by and watch this happen to the most vulnerable people in society and to God's earth and not do something about it. And so that was the initial impetus to try and, try be part of the army of people standing up for what's right.
Right. Well, even to top on that, you are in California right now, and even all over the West Coast, we see fires ravaging all over the West Coast. So can you give the viewers an update about what's going on with these fires in California, Oregon, Colorado? They're all over the West Coast.
Well, just my home state of California has had over 4 million acres burned this year. Yeah. One fire in and of itself is more than 1 million acres. Just to put it in perspective for people who aren't from the West Coast, Connecticut, the whole state of Connecticut is 3.7 million acres. So we're already bigger than Connecticut. And we're just in the middle of fire season. So what's going on? The record fires, and this is more than twice any year. And I think it's literally something like 15 times last year in terms of acreage burned. But what's going on is the record fires followed the record heat month ever in California, which was August, which included the highest temperature ever recorded on the planet Earth, which is Death Valley, 130 degrees in August of this year. And so what we're seeing is we are experiencing climate change on a daily basis in terms of these fires and the resulting air pollution and loss of life and property.
We need a Green New Deal in this country. I know Joe Biden has a climate policy that's pretty good, but it's not as good as AOC and Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal. With that said, we see Joe Biden also saying he is for fracking. So is Donald Trump. So with all that and all the craziness going on in our climate right now, what kind of policy can we do? How can we trust these people, even people that we voted for, such as Joe Biden, that are for fracking? And we've seen earthquakes all over the country and issues with methane going in, and that's hurting our climate.
Well, the Biden plan on climate, which he calls the Build Back Better plan,
right,
is actually a very aggressive plan that does address the climate needs. And Rob, let me just give you some of the, sort of high points of the plan.
Sure.
One is $2 trillion in the first 4 years of government spending. And that means building charging stations. It means weatherizing houses. It means building high-speed rail. It means building affordable housing. $2 trillion is a huge amount of money to spend over 4 years. Secondly, he's talking about 100%. He's not talking about, this is the plan, 100% clean electricity generation by 2035. That is really aggressive. Honest to goodness, that is a very aggressive goal. And 100% carbon neutrality economy-wide by 2050. So when you look at this plan, it basically is to set the framework for us to move to a clean energy economy at top speed, which is necessary. And let me say this, I've talked to Bernie Sanders about climate. Bernie cares about climate. It's been a cornerstone of what he stood for. But I've also talked a lot to Joe Biden about climate. And he really does. I was very impressed. He does get this. He does care about this. He said to me, if the only thing I do is address the climate crisis before I die, I will die happy. Okay. And so I think he gets it in his bones. And I think that his plan actually does create millions of good paying middle-class jobs, which is a huge issue in America with the unemployment rate we have and the economic inequality. It also addresses the air pollution, water pollution, toxicity that this country has concentrated in underserved Black and brown communities. And so I really believe that if you go through this plan, which I have, that it is aggressive, it is thoughtful, it can get done. And even more than that, Rob, it is going to equip the vice president to lead the world, because it's important to remember, this is a global problem. If the US gets it perfect and the rest of the world doesn't, the rest of the world does 86% of the greenhouse gas emissions. We do 14%. If 86% continues to go on its merry way and grow, our 14% isn't going to solve the problem. We know that. So we have to have an international compact, an international cooperation to together address this issue. And that means for us, we have to put our house in order, because if I go to you and say, why don't you solve the problem for me? I'm going to keep emitting the most per capita. People are not, for good reason, are going to give us no credibility. We've got to make the step to show we're doing everything that we can. And now we're asking you to join us together to basically preserve life on Earth.
To push back on that, if the Republicans do win back the Senate, though, Tom, what's going to happen to a lot of these Biden plans, whether it's something on the environment, something on taxes? We know the Republicans, and they did the same thing to Obama. They are not going to let Joe Biden get anything done. These Republicans are sold out to Donald Trump and Donald Trump's policies. If Joe Biden wins, we're not going to get any of this done. Are you worried about that?
I agree, Rob. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. The number one thing we have to do for climate, for racial justice, for economic justice the number one thing is to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But there's no question, you're absolutely right. Unless we flip the Senate, we will stop the bleeding, but we won't get the transformation that we need to address the problems in a deep way. Absolutely agree. I mean, there's no way to pass a $2 trillion clean energy infrastructure plan with Mitch McConnell being the majority leader of the Senate. And so but look, NextGen is about turnout. NextGen is about enabling and encouraging people between the ages of 18 and 35 to turn out, because that's 40% of the voters potential voters in the United States that voted half the rate of other Americans, most progressive, most diverse generation in America by far. And so, my whole point is, I get you. We need to flip the Senate. We need Chuck Schumer to be the person running the Senate, not Mitch McConnell. And so I'm 100% with you that if we win the White House and don't flip the Senate, that's going to be inadequate for the transformation we need. A big step up from where we are, but inadequate for what we need. But Rob, you should know, I believe we're going to have a generational, transformational, record-setting turnout election in November of 2020.
I know Politico just wrote an article about 2 weeks ago about you met with Jared Bernstein and Ron Klain, 2 Biden aides. Have you talked to them about, I know you obviously have probably talked about environmental policy, but anything about maybe being an EPA director or something in the Biden cabinet?
Look, what I've really been talking about is this nexus of economic policy. Like, what does it take to have a strong economic policy at home? How does that fit into a green economy? How do we create that combination of economic justice, racial justice, environmental justice, and growth? And so when I think about climate, I think people tend to think about climate in terms of the EPA or the Department of Energy. I don't. Just so you know, as far as I'm concerned, every cabinet post has got to be a climate post. You know, we have to have people, the Secretary of State has to know this is a global problem, and it's the Secretary of State has responsibilities. The Commerce Department, that's about economic development. It's about trade. That's a huge climate post. So as far as I'm concerned, when I look at this, we're talking about a need to transform the world. You can't do it by putting it in, one department over here, one agency over here. It's really critical that it go. I think that's the point of the Biden plan, is it's not about climate. It's about economic justice and environmental justice and climate. But it's really, we're going to have to realize that this problem is so deep. It's got huge economic implications. Huge economic. I mean, if we're going to build new products, if we're going to move to a green energy economy, that means a lot of new stuff. We have to invent stuff. We have to invent electric cars, or the Chinese will do it. We have to invent the ideas so that we can get things done. That's what the Americans are really good at that. We're really good at innovation and entrepreneurship and new ideas. We have to do that. And the government has got to put a framework in so that, in fact, it can happen.
Are you worried about people that are Sanders, Elizabeth Warren supporters, even supporters of yourself in the presidential realm, that are not going to go out and vote for Joe Biden and may vote third party? Because, we heard in the debates, Joe Biden says, I beat Bernie Sanders. I beat the socialists. A lot of Bernie Sanders supporters I talk to think that that's talking down to people like them that supported Bernie.
Well, obviously, it's absolutely critically important for the future of this country and the future of this planet and everybody on it that the United States have a transformational election. And the choices in front of us, in any kind of realistic way, are either Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And I am a absolutely fervent Joe Biden supporter. I believe that he is going to be a transformational president. I believe that he is, Bernie Sanders himself is a fervent Joe Biden supporter. Elizabeth Warren has endorsed Joe Biden. We all know, and honestly, I believe that he will have a transformational administration, that he understands that history has chosen him to be the fulcrum for this absolutely critical and necessary change. And if you look back at other elections, Robin, I would say this to your friends who were Bernie supporters, which I respect, or Elizabeth Warren supporters, whom I respect. We have to do this together. And are there differences between what Senator Sanders or Senator Warren were saying and what Joe Biden's saying? Sure, there are. But those differences are minuscule compared to the chasm of difference between what Joe Biden represents and what Donald Trump represents. And so I would encourage everybody, you may have differences with Joe Biden, but he is absolutely far and away the best and only hope for transformation. And I would say he is a decent man who cares about human beings. He cares about people across the board. And I think that he is absolutely committed to the ideas about justice and fairness. And so I really encourage Bernie Sanders supporters and Elizabeth Warren supporters not to shy away and say, I have these differences and therefore I can't vote for him, but to understand that this is the only place to go, that third party votes are votes where you're not supporting our one real hope to make a transformation. And I'm super optimistic, just so you know, Rob. I am super optimistic that people between 18 and 35 are going to turn out higher than they ever have, more than they ever have, and that is going to be a huge power behind a successful Biden-Harris campaign. Honest to God, I think you guys are going to do it, and I encourage every one of you to do it, because it's critical that, in fact, you guys take the power.
Tom, I want to kick this around and talk about some political issues to get the second segment of the interview. What was your opinion on the presidential debate? Because it seemed like Donald Trump was just ranting and raving the whole time, didn't even give Joe Biden a chance to talk and state his policies.
You know, I felt that it was a display of the complete lack of control that Mr. Trump has. And it was a display of his disdain for democracy, his taste for fascism. Honestly, I thought it was when he couldn't disavow white supremacists, when he couldn't accept democracy and say, if I don't win, I accept that. He is basically saying, I don't believe in democracy. And it was on full display. And he obviously didn't believe in the rules of the debate because he didn't obey any of them. So you basically have a guy who's saying, look, here's the law of the land. Me, I am the law of the land. And what I say goes. And that means anything. And I honestly thought that Joe Biden did a very good job of keeping his cool, of making his points, of showing that he cares about people, and answering the questions. He answered the climate question, I thought, very well, because he does know it very well, and he does care about it. So I felt bad for the moderator who lost control. You know, I don't know if you know this, Rob, but in another lifetime, I played a lot of soccer. I played college soccer. And I used to, after I got out of college, and when I had kids, I used to ref kids games. And I used to teach soccer in the summer sometimes. And you can't let the game get out of control. You as a referee, you just can't let it happen. And you have to be firm about it. And the rules are here to be enforced to protect everybody on the field. And so I'm not going to let you be reckless. It's not going to happen. And clearly the moderator had never reffed a soccer game, because everybody would have had damaged knees.
I didn't know you played soccer. That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know that.
I was the captain of my college soccer team.
Oh, wow. I'll have to look into that after the show. Just to maybe there's some YouTube clips of you playing.
God forbid.
All right. Anyway, to go back into Trump and what you said about the debate now, we saw all this dog whistling to the white nationalist groups, to QAnon, to the Proud Boys. Do you believe if he does get reelected, even if Joe Biden wins, Pandora's box is open? This rhetoric is out there. Do you believe that this could lead to a race war?
Look, I don't think Mr. Trump's going to get reelected.
Yeah, right.
I don't think so. If we do our job as citizens and show up and vote the way you already have, Rob, I think that the overwhelming bulk of Americans don't want him reelected and want to elect Joe Biden. And so, I'm not going to, I strongly believe that that's what's going to happen, because that's what Americans want. And I think this is a democracy, and that's how it works. If people show up and vote for Joe Biden, he wins. This has been a very divisive race. We have heard the president on TV in the debate asking his supporters to go and police the polls. And we know, we obviously know what that means. That means intimidate voters, harass voters. I'm asking you to go out and subvert democracy. But to be fair, the tactic of the Republican Party before Trump, the tactic of the Republican Party for Trump's election, and the tactic for the Republican Party in 2020 is to subvert democracy and to prevent American citizens from voting. It's been consistent, it's widespread. They are doing it in multiple venues in every way they can think of. And a lot of it has to do with specifically preventing African Americans from voting. And, I don't think we can say enough. Given America's history on race, given the hundreds of years, the blood, sweat, and tears it took to get the right for African Americans to vote in this country, to then subvert that intentionally as a tactic is despicable. And we're seeing it on a broad basis. We're seeing it unapologetically from this president. It is, we need to call out wrong. People like to talk about tactics and they don't like to make judgments. That is morally wrong. And what we're seeing, the idea of taking away the franchise from American citizens, including young people, trying to pass laws to prevent young people from voting, thinking up ways to take away the rights after they were given them from people who'd been incarcerated in Florida, trying to figure out a way to take away their right to vote. It's consistent, it's absolutely undemocratic, it's unjust, and it is despicable.
We know President Trump just came out. There was an alert on CNN right before we came on the air that said President Trump wants to debate on October 15th. He's going to do it with plexiglass. If you're Joe Biden, do you go into that debate when you know the president is contagious, when you know people in his campaign and his family are sick with the virus? And you could get sick. Joe Biden is 77 years old. If he gets sick, that could be a big issue, even if his family gets sick. So what would you do if you were the Biden campaign? Would you debate the president again on October 15th?
Well, look, I think it's been shown already that Joe Biden's not scared to debate Donald Trump. In fact, he won that first debate hands down. Every debate is an opportunity for Joe Biden to show how much better he is than Donald Trump. Having said that, I don't think there's any way the Biden campaign can take a risk of the vice president getting sick. So I can't answer your question until I know how to weigh those two things, because every chance for the vice president to debate Donald Trump is a chance to bury him. And I think that's exactly what Joe Biden did in the first debate, was just bury Donald Trump. And so to me, but then there's the alternative side of it. They have to make sure that the vice president is protected from illness. And let's be fair. I don't think there's any question that at the first debate, Mr. Trump had to be COVID positive.
I agree.
I mean, if he was experiencing the extreme distress that he was experiencing 2 days later, that doesn't happen in the first 2 days of COVID. We all know that. So I think that they've got to be very, very careful in terms of health, but I don't think they have to be worried at all. The vice president comes across as what he is, which is a caring person who's very experienced and knowledgeable, has answers, real, honest, comprehensive answers to issues like climate, like COVID, on foreign policy, in terms of job creation. And I think it's a great opportunity for him, but I think they can't do it unless he's going to be safe.
And we go into speaking about the Supreme Court, because I want to talk about the hypocrisy of Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and the Republican Party. With the Supreme Court, we saw what happened with the Obama administration at the end. When they tried to put Merrick Garland on, Republicans said, we can't do that. Let's wait for after the election. Now, with the Trump administration, they want to slam it in right before the election. And now there's 3 senators that are on the Judiciary Committee that are sick. What's your take on this?
I think that your basic point is they are acting completely hypocritically. They are showing the American people that they don't tell the truth. They are saying, we will do whatever we can to get as much power as we can, in a way, whatever it takes. And the problem with that is, every time a senior person in the American government lies, it's an attack on democracy. Every time they break their word or act hypocritically, it's an attack on democracy, because democracy is about trusting everybody to actually try and do what's right for the country. And so to see that is very disheartening. It's something that will take a long time to overcome. And it really does come back and to this debate, because what you could see in the debate was Mr. Trump had scorn for the rules of the debate, for any kind of respect, for any sense of decency. And when you see that from the president of the United States, when you see that from the majority leader of the Senate, scorn for democracy, absolute indifference to truth, to telling the truth, you break down the trust in the system. And that is something that is very, very dangerous in a democracy and will take, I'm hoping that the American people, and I believe we will, are going to show up and repudiate that disdain and that arrogance that these Republican leaders are showing for the system itself and for the American people. They're trying to basically say, we're going to not listen to you. We're going to cram this down your throat, whether you like it or not, because we can. And that is a terrible thing for an American political leader to say.
So the last question, as far as COVID-19 goes, what do you think should be done with COVID-19? Because it seems like the Congress is at a standstill. There's people that are homeless. People don't have health care right now, and they're going hungry.
Look, I don't think there's any question that they need another round of stimulus, another round of protection, another round of support for the American people. And in particular, I can tell you, the place in the American governmental system where you can do deficit financing is at the federal government, not at the state governments. Right. I know my home state of California, it's illegal to deficit spend on the budget in the state of California. So we need the federal government to, in fact, come to the help of suffering Americans, and also to come to the help of state and municipal governments who cannot deficit spend and have had a huge hole blown in their budgets. And so to see these Republicans refusing to come to that aid, refusing to do what only they can do statutorily in terms of our federal government system is very, very disappointing. I think, it's one of the many reasons why we need a change in the White House and in the Senate. We cannot afford look, I really don't even understand their logic anymore because it's so inconsistent. These are the people who talked about deficits like they were cancer. Yeah. And as soon as they got in, blew up the deficit $1 trillion by giving tax breaks to big companies and rich people. Every time they talked about deficits, it was 20 years I listened to it of like, this is the worst thing. It really was like a cancer. This will kill us. And as soon as they got in, they blew up the deficit to give their supporters, the rich people and the big corporations, tax breaks. If they come back and say, we're deficit hawks, it's like, excuse me, sir, please stop. You said that for 20 years, but your behavior proves that you're not telling the truth. So stop. I don't know how to have the conversation anymore.
Right, Tom, thanks so much for coming. I greatly appreciate your time, Coach.
Fire-breathing Rob, it is a treat to be with you.
All right, and stay safe too.
You too.
Thanks so much, Tom. Bye now.
See you, man.